Welcome to the Heartbreak to Happiness show with Sara Davison. If you're struggling with a breakup and you feel shocked, angry, betrayed, devastated, or sad and alone, then this podcast is for you. Best-selling author and award-winning host Sara Davison shares how you too can get on with your life to heal, grow, and move from heartbreak to happiness. Here's your host, Sara Davison.
Welcome back to the show. And today, my guest is Stacey Duguid. Stacey is an ex-fashion editor, a journalist, and soon an author of In Pursuit of Happiness. So I am super excited to welcome the amazing Stacey Duguid to the show. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you very much. I expect a full kind of, I don't know, array of dancers to appear behind me with bouncy balls at that point. Where are they?
They're coming. You know me. They're on their way.
Excellent.
Well, I'm super excited to have you because, we've done an event together and you had the whole audience in stitches, but also like flabbergasted at some of your stories and some of explain what you've been through. So I'm very excited to be able to share that with everyone listening and watching as well on YouTube. So Stacey, tell us a little bit about you. So put us in the picture for those of you who haven't seen all the amazing things you do.
I was born in Manchester and I was raised in Scotland. So I sort of identify as a Northern Scot, which is very odd. But it is important because I mention it quite a lot, only because in context, moving to London when you're 19 years old with no qualifications and no money, and then just starting off in fashion is kind of gutsy. And I hadn't realised that it would take. I hadn't realised. Of course, had we realised what it would be like, would we have got divorced? No, maybe. But when you're a kid and you're in London and you want to work in fashion, and that's what I did. I met people people laugh. This is the 90s, right? So I met people on dance floors and naughty people on dance floors, or naughty dance floors, and so. I never had. Do you know what? I had never had a CV, and I'll just do a little roll call of my employers. My first job was in a bar, then I worked at Sassy Job Harvey Nichols. From there I went to work for Paul Smith. From there I went to work for Giorgio Armani. From there I went to work for Prada. From there I went to be the executive fashion editor of Elle in 2004. And I was there until 2013. And then I became a freelance journalist, and I worked for Net-a-Porter in the meantime. I'm basically freelance now, and I had a big corporate job a couple of years ago. We won't talk about that.
Yes.
That out. Not allowed to talk about that.
Okay.
And it was only up until that big corporate job a couple of years ago that I actually needed a CV. They asked me for a CV, and I was like, do you know what? I've never had one. How cool is that, though? It was like a whole word of mouth career. And I've had a good career. She says, I've had a good career. I'm not retired. Far too young to retire at the age of 49. But yeah, I went from working in PR in my 20s, and at 30, I was fashion editor of Elle, and my then editor, Lorraine Candy, who you know, she was the one that discovered I could write. I had no idea. I had a column on the back page called Mademoiselle, Confessions of an Elle Girl, where I basically just it was a bit of a kind of rampage through London, and I just got paid to write about it. So that was quite fun. And here we are, all these years later, just finished a Telegraph column where I had a divorce-related sort of midlife, starting again column, which I think is when you and I met.
Yeah, we were introduced, I think, by Rosie Green, and lovely Rosie. I came over to see you, didn't I?
It was amazing. It was in my rented house. It was the second move. I moved 3 times in 2 years. Well, 4 times if you include this house. And you were very, very helpful. This is going back. When was this? 2 years ago?
Yeah, maybe 2.5 years ago now.
Yeah. And I was in this really, really terrible, awful place because I didn't know who to turn to. And I started to talk about my divorce journey on Instagram when I realized that I could either, I talk about this a lot, where I could either tell the truth about what's actually going on in my life or leave social media because, I can't bullshit. I can't say everything's fine and look at my outfit and I'm off to Paris. And actually, no, I cry myself to sleep every night and everything's gone to shit. And so I took the second route, which was the honesty route. And actually, by almost creating a community of like-minded people, not just women, but people around me. And I feel so fortunate because, people say that social media is a cesspit. No, not for me. I got to meet you. And I got to meet many other women who really helped me on that journey. And I know in return, I've helped other women on theirs. So it's been, quite, that's how we met. I just think it's so incredible, actually, it's coming together on social media. But I was in a very bad place when you came to my rescue. Thank you.
But I don't know, you're very welcome. And you are a real powerhouse of strength and a real beacon of inspiration for so many people who follow you on Instagram. And I know a lot of people say to me, Stacey's really helped me. Just sharing your story really helps. And it's brave, though. It is brave to put yourself out there, isn't it? To be that vulnerable and open. Because like you say, social media is known for best foot forward. Everything's perfect here. But with you, we get the real brutal honesty, and you weave that with such a belly laughing kind of sense of humor. When I watch your feeds, even your little videos, every single one, I'm like, oh my God, that's hilarious. Like I'm laughing out loud. Yeah, how do you do that? How do you take a subject that is so difficult and make it humorous?
I think that, there have been moments where, so this is an interesting question because I don't know what I'm supposed to be on social media anymore, because for some people, paying clients, I'm too extra. The women that follow me and want the divorce journey, they don't want the fashion stuff. It's a very difficult sort of fine line, but what I always do, without fail, without exception rather, is I'm true to myself in that moment and that authentic self of how I feel in that moment. Now, that isn't to say that when I'm crying on the floor at 3:00 in the morning, which is less and less these days, thank goodness, I don't take to Instagram at that moment because that would be just all wrong. But what I do tend to do is in the aftermath of those, or what I did, past tense, in the aftermath of those really, really desperate and low moments, I sit and I think about them and I distill it into my Apple Notes. And those notes, just by the very process of writing it, we all talk about journaling, which I've never done. I suppose it's what I do for a living.
Yeah.
By writing those things down, I can then go back and go, okay, I'm going to edit that little bit and that, but not much. And in the moment, so not right in the guts, like awful, like tear-stained moment, but in the kind of day that follows that, there's moments that follow, I will post how I feel. And it's those, and I don't feel vulnerable in that moment because I have gathered myself off the floor, wiped my tears, I've had a drink, I've told a friend. But those pieces, those kind of extended captions, come on, Stacey, sorry, I've been sick for 2 weeks. Those extended captions are like a kind of mini look into what was going on 24 hours ago, and they always resonate with women. I don't feel like I've put myself in a vulnerable state, because you always have to hold something back. The idea that I would put absolutely everything out onto social media is just not true. It's not the case.
Yeah.
And I know that you know more about my situation because we've spoken very privately about it, and I know more about yours. But that's not, there are some things that are off limits. And in a way, that's how I feel. I protect myself. I'm very careful of that, but I'm also very true to how I was genuinely feeling, and that resonates.
It does, and also it's, you know, you have to look after yourself, have those boundaries, and also your kids as well. So with that in mind, can you share for those people who don't know about your divorce journey, just sort of, what happened to you?
This is me reaching for a glass of whiskey. It's not actually, it's just sparkling water that I rather unprofessionally have opened whilst we're recording the podcast. Come on, Stacey.
I love it.
It started in 2018. Well, way before then, but, you know, we met, I was very much in love. I hadn't done any therapeutic work on myself, and I really needed to. I had a lot of unresolved childhood trauma and wounds that I hadn't dealt with. And we tend to find that when we are in the state of trauma from childhood, we match with, you know, someone who we wouldn't normally match with, or our wounds, you know, are met, our pain, we meet each other's pain. It's a long-winded way of saying that in about 2018, you know, when my kids were still very little, but not babies, I started to question who I was and what I was doing, and the quagmire of motherhood was beginning to fade, and I was dissatisfied with my career because although I had this great career, I wasn't quite sure of where I was and the next step. And that's what women do. We take time out with motherhood, and that's, you know, I imagine people are shaking their fists at the screen right now, but actually most women do. And most women, because we have an inner narrative that is somehow passed to us from the wider culture or from family or from whomever, we pick up the lion's share of the grunt work, and the grunt work being the house, you know, the kids. Oh, and layer onto that a full-time job, and you absolutely, no wonder you turn around and you're like, who the fuck am I? And how did I get here? And why am I doing this? I have no clue. And the dissatisfaction sounds selfish in a way because, oh, well, you had it. Hang on, what more did you want? You had the children, you had, you know, the house that you both bought together, you had X, Y, Z, and a career and friends. But not everything is what it seems on, you know, on the outside in. It's like sometimes you could be in the most lonely relationship within all of this perceived perfection. And I was lonely. We didn't really connect anymore. We didn't really talk anymore. And yeah, I was still in this, not quagmire quite, of the, you know, the immediate years that follow childbirth, but still in that sort of, you know, taking on the lion's share of the role around the house. And I'm not talking about the financial here. I'm talking about, you know, the cooking, the cleaning, the keeping the house clean, the keeping things ticking over, like making sure that the kids have got this and that. And then what? When did I assume this role and why? And I'd lost myself. I'd lost myself in my own physical being and in the relationship, and I didn't know where I fit in anymore. And I left. I left the marriage.
A big thing to do, to make that decision to leave. And you left, didn't you?
I left. And I left the family home, which is probably the last taboo, you know, a woman, as in, you know, feminist taboo. It's the woman leaving the family home and moving into rented accommodation. But what happened after that was utter carnage. Because I really, when I look back at that time, and when I say I found myself dissatisfied, I didn't know who I was in the middle of this, you know, I had this big corporate job, I had the kids, I had, you know, all this kind of stuff to balance. I would say during that period, there was, I don't know how you classify a nervous breakdown, but I would say there was some kind of, I don't know whether it was menopause, premenopause rather, perimenopause, I think it's called, yes. There's that hormonal shift that happens with women when we suddenly go, oh my God, okay, we're halfway done. No, actually, we're more than halfway done. And there's this kind of last hurrah. It's like your body starts spitting out big fat eggs, in most cases, in my case rather. Your kids are getting, becoming rather more self-sufficient. I don't know, there are all these, suddenly this new world opens up, and I thought to myself, I can either remain in this world as is, wondering what if, or I can leave now, or I can stay until they're 18. And so I jumped, but I didn't expect what came next to happen. I had no idea what was going to happen, because how can you plan for something like that? Well, now I would argue you can, because you go and see Sara Davison. You can plan, but I didn't plan. With the caveat of, I'm neurodivergent. And so but that diagnosis didn't come until 3 years ago. So I didn't quite understand this kind of impulsivity as I understand it now, or what is often called in autism, ADHD, time blindness. And so I just thought everything's going to be fine, and I'll be fine. Of course I will. I've always worked. I earn a good salary. I can do this. But it wasn't fun. It was far from fun.
So, I mean, I know more about your story, but what, for people listening, tell us about that carnage that happened next, because you really did go through a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
Once.
Well, I moved out, then I had to move back in because of COVID. So then we were living together, which was actually really, really lovely, because we were, separated essentially, but under the same roof rather, and which allowed us to parent the children together during that difficult time. I then, and I moved out to this rental that I hadn't actually stepped foot in, and it was an absolute mess and a nightmare, and it was dangerous and dirty. I say dangerous, I mean it. Sockets hanging off the walls, like horrible. I moved in there, and I moved out quite quickly soon after into the house that you came to, which was a beautiful house, but it was ever so expensive. And then suddenly you don't have the big corporate salary anymore for, reasons like, well, let's just say it ended. Another ending. Around that time, I've lost track of time. I think we're now in 2020, 2021. Crikey, Sarah. When was it you came to see me?
It must have been 2021.
It must have been.
Yeah.
And so the April of 2021, I was living in a house that I couldn't afford without my job. I lost my job. And then I was diagnosed, thankfully, through my therapist, who I've been seeing for 5 years. She recommended I go and see a psychiatrist. And then I was diagnosed neurodivergent, which then began to make sense of everything.
Yeah.
But that wasn't, enough. Without a salary, I was no longer self-sufficient. I'd already agreed to 50-50. And in this country, when you agree to 50-50, regardless of the income and expenditure and everything else, you don't get maintenance, child support. And so I was on my own. And so I moved out of there, and I moved into a friend's house for 3 months with the kids. A family friend, the kids knew their family really well. They weren't there. They were in Australia, because I was basically free rent. You help us sell our house. I sold the house with them, all good. And then I moved in here, which is the house I eventually bought. But the financial settlement took a long time to organize and to sort out. And no wonder, these things just don't happen overnight. So when my second divorce, that's a joke, I'm never getting married again. What I would do differently is like, my gosh, I've got a whole list for you, ladies, gentlemen. And I certainly wouldn't be so, naive. But how could I have foreseen that I would have, been so deeply unhappy, moved into well, of course, I should have seen the flat before I moved in. It was COVID. How did I know I was going to lose my job? How did I know? How did I know? How did I know? This is the thing. When you head off into being a single parent, you just don't know. You don't know what's ahead.
You don't know. And doing things differently, though, doesn't necessarily mean it would have been easier or happier either. So it's interesting because you never know what's coming around the corner. And, very similar for me, it came out of mine and then just kept getting hit by what seemed like another thing and another thing. But actually, I mean, I know I've seen your journey and you just got stronger and stronger as you go through. And you also, I think, bought a puppy in the middle of this.
Thank God for her, because she's my soulmate. She's my soulmate. And she's called Poppy. And I swear to you, my dog died during all of this. It was just like a kind of like never-ending grief. A grief for the marriage that I hadn't realized I would grieve so badly. It was a never-ending grief. It was a grief for the marriage I hadn't realized I would grieve for so deeply. Yeah. It was a grief for our initial custodial arrangement, which has now changed, by the way, because eventually the children were like, we have to make this work. But in the initial months that followed, it was a 4 days on, 3 days off thing, which was just like horrendous. I'd lie in the bath in the middle of the day drinking a glass of wine, just sobbing. Yeah. Missing my children, missing my family life, missing everything, and thinking, what the hell have I done? Yeah. Yeah. But you have been on that journey as a single mum. How have you found being a single mum? There's obviously some great things and there's some more challenging things. How have you navigated that? Well, once we all got over the fact that I hadn't left them, which was really, really, really hard. And how did you do that? How did you do that? Through a lot of talking and a lot of connection. And I have become, the relationship I have with my children now is far closer, far deeper. And I now, if I can help it, I don't have childcare. I manage my day, my work around them. Yeah. And that sounds like a privileged place to be, but it's not, because I earn way less money. But right now, in this sort of aftermath of the divorce, they are just beginning to settle down now, and it's 3 years this summer. And they are really, really coming into their own. Their confidence has grown. We talk about things. I've had to learn from my own therapist about how to create boundaried and safe relationships with them. And really, this has been a sort of crash course in how to mother a child when they are inconsolable with grief. Oh. And manage your own grief. I mean, it is just horrendous. But one of the things my therapist did say to me was, don't be afraid to cry in front of them. They can see you cry, and they can also see you build back up again. Yeah. Yeah. And that was actually wonderful to know that. Yeah. I did the same at the beginning when my son was a baby. He was only one when we broke up, but I wouldn't cry in front of him, and I would always put on this sort of smiley, fake sort of energy, because I had to, I thought that was the right thing to do, until the therapist I was seeing was like, sorry, they can pick up, babies pick up, kids pick up on energy. So even though you're sort of smiling, they know you're not happy. And that was true. So, that suddenly having that pressure lifted. I mean, we're not talking uncontrollable sobbing and hysterics, but just be sad. And then I always used to say, right, how do we cheer ourselves up? So then he learned that coping mechanism of, running around or, listening to music, jumping up and down, giving a hug, something like that would cheer me up.
So then he was learning those coping tools as well, which actually in some ways,
Yeah.
kids that have been through this kind of upset, and actually there's research that shows they are stronger and they make better decisions when they're older, rather than being wrapped up in cotton wool. And the first thing that goes wrong, kids are turning to self-harm or even suicide.
Oh gosh.
It's like they need these coping tools, right, to help them through. So they do learn a lot from us, um, even in the tough times, I think, for sure.
I think what I learned from my own mother's divorce when I was 3, sorry, Mum, but you didn't handle this one particularly well. She kept repeatedly, I just always knew that she hated my father, and she would badmouth him, and it created for me a very flimsy foundation, because the children need to know that both parents, okay, there are of course the obvious exceptions, domestic abuse, etc. But by and large, we're not talking about narcissists or, gosh, financial abuse and all of the crazy stuff that goes on in relationships.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, when two people have fallen out of love, the best thing you can do is just to keep your thoughts about your partner, ex-partner, to yourself, and just, even when he's, not he or she, they haven't turned up for something, or just try and keep it together for the
Yeah.
sake of your child, because it is very destabilizing. And that is one of the things I'm most proud of, actually. Yeah, I've managed to retain that air of, dad was busy, he couldn't come sports day, or, it's fine, I'm here, we'll figure it out, just positive.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be fake, you don't have to lie, but you just, the bad mouthing of the ex-partner is a no.
Yeah, because even though it feels good to us in the moment, potentially it could do, actually the damage is huge. So we have to definitely not do that. Absolutely. It's really good advice. And I think a lot of people, kids can hear stuff as well, can't they? Even if you're in the kitchen on the phone to your mate and you think they're upstairs not listening, they can hear
everything.
They do.
They hear everything. They hear everything. I mean, I know that people are probably listening to this thinking, oh, what, why did she leave, and etc. Back to what I was saying earlier about the sort of comments or the extended captions I write on my Instagram. Of course, there is more to the story. There always is. But I would say that primarily one of the biggest shifts for me has been a discovery of self, and more, and also curiosity again. So I had really lost a sense of curiosity about life, and I felt that life had just become this kind of endless repeat of half term, spring holidays. I was like, holy crap. And it's, I hope, see what therapist bills are like when in 10 years time for my kids. But I genuinely believe that by seeing their mother happier, they are happier.
Absolutely.
So, you can't see here, but I've got a little art studio set up in the corner. I'm starting a master's in fine art part-time in September.
I saw that.
And these things have come really slowly. I have been at rock bottom. And by the way, when I say rock bottom, I never knew I could go so low.
Yeah.
And I'm still on antidepressants from that period. And I never thought I would recover from the feeling of deep loss and a deep sense of, I didn't know what on earth I'd done, where I was going, how I was going to feed the kids. But I picked myself up, and I'm now in a place where, things matter less. So this idea that, I mentioned earlier about the career, I was dissatisfied with this. Well, it's because I had put these sort of, expectations or demands on myself where I had to succeed. But success to me now looks very different. Success is sitting around, and this sounds really cheesy, but we never sat around the table as a family. It was always different meal times. You know, whether I was coming in late from work or he was, or the kids were eating early with the nanny. And that doesn't happen anymore. We sit at the table and we have a conversation.
Yeah.
And that is success to me now.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that about being a single mum as well. I find, yeah, I miss him intensely when he's not with me. But when he is with me at that quality time, I value every single second of it and savor every moment, you know, doing the school runs and even going in to sort of tidy up after him and things like that, which, you know, sometimes I know my married friends who've been doing it for years are like, oh my God, the kids make such a mess. And I'm like, yeah, but that's when I get to be mum, and I love being mum. It's one of my best jobs that I have is being mum and connecting and having time with them without being interrupted. And I think you have, like you said, a really strong bond with your kids when you're a single mum. You have that ability to create those magic moments. So yeah, okay. So I mean, I love your stories about dating, Stacey. You talk a lot about moving on, and you know, for people listening, I mean, tell us a little, because your journey through the dating world has been, when we had you on stage and I was interviewing you and Rosie, very different ends of the spectrum of dating. So maybe share, if you don't mind, some of your dating experiences. How did you get back out there? Because a lot of people, having gone through that kind of trauma, would just retreat, shut down, and no men ever again, or partners of any kind.
Well, unfortunately, what I did was I tried to, as I was in this, I call it the crack den. When I was in the shitty rental crack den, Breaking Bad, I mean, honestly, I swear they used to cook crack in the oven. I mean, the oven had to be replaced. It was vile.
Wow.
When I was living in the crack den, I had to, so bearing in mind, some days I wouldn't see my kids for 4 days. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I was on autopilot at work. It was horrendous. So, of course, what do you do when you feel that terrible? You download every single dating app known to womankind and you message a bunch of freaks whilst drunk on red wine and go meet them. I mean, honestly, I had so many dates, misjudged. I was sitting on these dates, I go, oh my God. I went on one date. Okay. I mean, I threw myself into it because I felt so sad. And I think in hindsight, what I really was looking for was a kind of replacement security.
Yeah.
We all know you can only find security within yourself, but when you've been in a partnership or you've not felt secure in yourself ever, that's actually a really big statement. And
Absolutely.
sometimes you can't fathom what that means. So off I went on a few dates, several hundred, and
400.
once, oh God, I just had a facial with my friend in Notting Hill, she's called Teresa Tame, and she does these like intense facials. My face was bright red. I was like, Teresa, I've got a date now. She was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what we're going to do. Anyway, I had this bright red face. I came out and he messaged me and he said, oh, I'm outside. And I was like, oh, Teresa, you've got to come with me. Just poke your head out. Anyway, he was doing that thing as you do when you're quite nervous. He was pacing up and down. He was pacing back down towards us. And he literally looked like my stepdad on his way to golf, like sort of way older than he looked on his picture.
No.
And he was wearing this like golf gear. And I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. And I've got this red face. Of course, then he saw me because I have red hair. So, unmissable, really. Yeah. And we go on this date. We had an argument within 5 minutes.
An argument?
An argument within 5 minutes. And then there were others that were just like deadly boring. And one guy just talked about his divorce, which, there's a lot of that and I can't bear the bad mouthing of the ex-wife. And so, we've all behaved badly, and we've all had bad things done to us. And it's a two-way street. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about it.
They're going to say that about their ex, they're going to say it about you. So again, it sets a tone. And who wants to hear about a breakup on your date? It's definitely a no-go area for date 1, 2, and 3.
Divorce was high on the conversation, really cheerful. the whole bunch of narcissists out there
Mm.
who prey on kind of vulnerable, just out of relationships, just out of marriages, and neurodivergent women who I didn't know at the time that I was, but we're fresh meat because our boundaries are very flimsy. They're very weak, and I'm constantly working on my boundaries.
So how did you spot those narcissistic personality types?
Oh, it took me a while because I've never dated one before.
Right.
But one in particular, it's in my book actually, coming out in September. Plug.
Ooh, exciting.
He's in there. Well, an amalgamation of characters, let's say that, for legal reasons. He's not the character, but heavily drawn upon. He broke me. He was the thing that finally broke me. And I've never spoken about him before.
Wow.
But he was a narcissist of the highest order. And I had never encountered a narcissist before. And I was shocked at the chasing pedestal. Up I was on the pedestal. And then he just kicked me down. Well, I was already down. And then things got really bad after that for me.
So did you find it hard to trust again after that?
Yeah, I did. And then almost immediately afterwards, I ended up, it was just like 2 weeks later, I was absolutely broken by this man, and I met another man. And he had similar traits, but not quite as intense. And he smothered me. It was as if like I was under his, like a huge heavy cloak, and I couldn't breathe. And after that experience, I was like, no more, absolutely no more. And by the way, I met the first narcissist on a dating app, and the second one I met in real life. I think you just have to be very careful, and it's easily said than done, easier said than done, when you're when you're that broken and you're in such a state, and you don't know whether you're coming or going, you can't sleep, you can't eat, all your energy is, focused on getting out of bed and making sure your kids are fed. Be very, very wary of the people that you go on dates with. And it's so bloody easy to say, just don't go on dates. No, go on dates, but just be very careful. Don't get pissed on rosé. Of course, you're going to get pissed on rosé. But also, when you come out of this phase of brokenness, you will discover something else about you. And it is there's a whole world out there to discover. So, for example, I went to my daughter's upstairs sick. Sex clubs.
Sex clubs. Okay, tell us about that. We want to know more.
I just watched. I was like, ooh, all right. It's not like ticking off a bucket list, but it's just like all the stuff I would never have done when I was married. Would I have gone off to Berlin to go to a leather fetish thing? No. Am I into it? No. Am I glad I did it? Yeah, of course I am.
Yeah.
Of course I am. I was safe because those clubs are very safe. There's security all over the place.
Yeah.
You go to properly organized, like Torture Garden's really good if you just want to go. Honestly, I think every newly divorced woman should go to Torture Garden, snog a girl, wearing, some sort of latex thong, leave and go, well, that was a good night. Why not?
I love your tips for getting over divorce. They're brilliant.
Honestly, why not? Why not?
Why not indeed? Why not indeed?
But married again for the rest of your life. You might as well make these couple of years, whatever it is, decade, however long you're single, you make it count. Absolutely. I'm not saying, but also be, in all seriousness, I look back at that period of initial dating and I'm like, oh, God, girl, what were you doing? But also maybe it's a necessity. And also it teaches you when you are on a dating app and you've come through the other side, don't date the guys, I'm saying guys or women, who are just in that, I call it the immediate aftermath as you were once in, because you know how you felt.
Yeah.
So you know how unavailable really you were, although you were presenting as available and you know how emotionally unavailable you were and how emotionally broken you were. So just apply that same logic to the men or the people that you date.
And I always think dating apps are a great way to get your confidence back. But it is, like you say, about making sure you're managing your own expectations of it. It might be Mr. or Miss right now rather than Mr. or Miss right?
Rose is really good at that.
Yes.
Rosie Green is really good at that.
She is. She's a superstar in lots of ways. And her journey has been, again, lots of ups and downs, as everybody's is, I think. And I think we really resonate with your story as well, because we've all felt those really dark times and we've all gone and done things. I've been on dates and gone, what am I doing? Why am I here? This is just ridiculous. And then trying to spend the next half an hour getting out of that date without being too offensive. I've never had an argument on a date like you. I mean, that's pretty impressive after 5 minutes, but that could be a good tactic to get out. You're not enjoying it.
Bye.
I love it. I love it. So, I mean, you've come through a lot and now you're writing a book. Tell us about your book, because I'm really excited. I know that's going to help lots and lots of people.
Well, it's finished. It's in. I never thought it would be. It's definitely the most difficult thing I've ever had to do. Both personally and career-wise, and I say that simply because everyone, it's a natural thing to say, "Oh, it must have been cathartic," or "Aren't you glad that? Aren't you glad you did it?" No, it wasn't cathartic. Because I have, and I still am in therapy of many years, dealing with childhood stuff and all sorts of things. By writing it, I really processed it properly, as if it were for the first time. And there were many days where I couldn't get out of bed, and I wrote it in bed. But it's really about, it starts off with, it's classically neurodivergent. It's like goes from one thing to another, to another, to another, back to another. And then it's how my conversations go as an ADHD, middle-aged, menopausal woman. I'm like, you've covered like 55 topics in 1 minute. And you're like, but you still remember all the threads. Anyway, and it's under 5 sections called motherhood, mating, marriage, money, and mayhem. And the first 4 headlines are written in the past tense. And the mayhem section is really about my divorce, and nothing to do with my ex, but it's how I felt about what was going on. Essentially the story I've just explained, but in much more detail. And mayhem is written in the first person, so it's as if it's happening now when you're reading it. It's quite intense in some parts. I talk about this kind of, this idea of a fairy tale princess life, where we all wake up one morning when we're 8 and we just know that we have this preordained, Prince Charming is coming on his his horse, or donkey in my case, around, and he'll be there soon. And you're like, oh shit, man, that doesn't happen. And the only person you can depend upon is yourself. And also, so it's called In Pursuit of Happiness, motherhood, mating. Sorry, no, hang on, let me get this right. In Pursuit of Happiness, mating, marriage, motherhood, money, mayhem.
And when's it out?
It's out in middle of September. Can't quite believe it. And I've told my children that they are not to even look at the cover until they're 18.
Oh, what's the cover?
My ass.
Your ass, that's hilarious.
Well, it's my, I'm wearing tight stockings, but yeah, it's yeah.
Okay, can't wait to
Yeah.
see this. I can't wait to see it. Of course it's your ass. What else would it be, Stacey?
Yeah, I know.
I
There's
love
my
it.
ass on the cover of a book. Oh dear.
I love it. Okay,
Yeah.
well, can we pre-order it now?
Oh, do you know what? The publisher was talking about that the other day, and I sort of put my head inside my handbag and thought, oh, I don't want to. It's weird because it's happening, and I need to. Yeah. Oh gosh, Stacey, calm down. Yes, you can pre-order it at some point soon, and I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, right. What else is next for you, Stacey? Are you still writing other things as well that we can follow you on and see what you're doing?
Oh, I never want to write another word again, and I'm decompressing from it. I've only just filed it. It was very late. It was difficult to write the last chapter.
Yeah.
There's a million things I wish I could have added in. I'm taking a break from writing at the moment, and you can follow me on my Instagram. I know I'll come back to it because it's something. And when I say I'm taking a break, I mean like a couple of months off it, because it's just all I did all day was write in bed. Right. And by the way, writing in bed was the only place I felt
Oh,
safe,
yeah.
which is really unusual for me. And I need to start exercising again. I need to get out. It's been quite a heavy thing to do. So I'm lying low for a bit. I will start writing again, but I'm starting my master's in September, so I'm really excited to do that. And I have this new career as an artist,
Which is very exciting. And where can we see your art apart from on your Instagram?
I'm going to set up a shop, and you're going to help me.
Okay, I will.
I just seem to be surrounded by all these amazing women with these incredible Instagram feeds, podcasts, YouTubes. I'm tech fail over here. So I'm sure that I can set up a little Instagram shop for my painting.
Absolutely. Yeah. And by the way, it's not me, it's my team, I have to say. I'm terrible at tech. I definitely know the right people. I've learned in life that it's who you know, not what you know.
Right.
Well, you were talking about how you do things very intensely, but I actually think that's your strength because
Do you?
Yeah. I think as you are is perfect because you come out with so much energy and so much intensity that nobody could sustain burning that bright. So it's going to be coming back to the groove, and it's about getting into that groove and understanding that's your flow, and it's okay.
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that, and that's shining your brightest. Some people never get to be that bright, Stacey, but you're just a little superstar.
Okay, well that makes me feel a whole lot better.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You truly don't change a thing. Just be able to manage your own emotions and
Yes, exactly. No, that's
and
really,
know you're
really
going to have that downtime. So in that time, you do what you need to do to bring it on. You do what you need to do to create the magic. And then know I've got 2 weeks of this, and then I'm going to retreat. And instead of it hitting you going, oh God, I'm here again, plan it.
Yes.
You take your control over the roller coaster, and you stop when you want to stop, not when you get thrown off, which is what most of us do in life.
That's really clever. Do you operate like that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I can operate everyone says to me, you work ridiculously hard. And I do. I work 6 days a week quite often. Like this morning, I was up at 5:30 and I will finish my webinar. My last one tonight finishes at 9 with my training school. So, that's a long day, but I train. So I've been to the gym already this morning. I walk my dog twice a day, which is my mindfulness sort of gap in the day. I'm not allowed, my rules for me, I'm not allowed to check my emails when I walk the dog. I just listen to nature. I just completely chat, even if it's 15 minutes. And then I have a couple of health practitioners that I regularly see. So a lady called Manira who does cacao ceremonies. Have you ever done that?
No.
Oh God, you have to come with me. It is insane. She's like amazing. She's part of my team. I could not go a month without seeing Manira. She's phenomenal. And there's another guy called Simon Hinton, who's a crazy, mad, but adorable healer in London, not far from you actually, who again, I see every sort of 4 to 6 weeks, maybe. that keeps me sane so I don't crash. If I don't do that, I can't
Oh,
so yeah, I'll definitely pass you their details and we can go to Manira together because she's great. But Simon, you should go on your own. Mad and wacky, but amazing healer.
how cool. That was so unexpected. I wasn't expecting you to say that.
Yeah, because I've noticed that, I will have burnout if I keep going. And also I get resentful, sometimes you can feel like,
Yeah.
and so actually for me to maintain it, I know that it's self-care, not when I crash, I pick myself up, but I have to keep these things going. Otherwise,
That's so clever.
yeah, it's just knowing, you just get to know your own system
Yeah.
and what works. And I know when I'm feeling tired, I'm like, right, I'm not going to feel guilty. I'm just going to take time out and I'm going to go and see my friends, or I'm just going to disconnect from social media. But how do you deal with the social media? I'm just really interested because obviously you've got a huge amount of followers. There's some really amazing people that follow
I
you.
need
A lot of love.
sort it out. I need to sort it out because I think you're right. The crash, and then I suddenly disappear, but I disappear from everyone, right? So I disappear from social media, from my Substack, not from my children, obviously, but from my friends. And to the point where people are like, I didn't know whether to knock on your door. And I think what you just said about the burnout, heading it off before it sucks you down, planning it, I think that's genius, actually. And knowing, I think this is what I need to do, knowing that I've got an intense period coming, there's going to be a crash, and then plan it in. That could be literally going for a long walk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Turning my phone off.
Yeah. And that how you operate is how you operate. There's nothing wrong with that. It's perfect. Yeah. It's just knowing it and accepting this is how I work. And I bet there's so many people listening who are like, oh, me too. That's what I do. I do that too. So it's not like most people do it another way. It's just most people aren't out there talking about it, honestly, Stacey, like you, So, I think you'll have helped a lot of people with what you just said, to be honest. So thank you.
I hope so.
One final question. My podcast is called Heartbreak to Happiness. And I think it's really important to know what happiness is for you, because even in those dark times, you can tap into it along the way. So what is happiness for you, Stacey?
In the dark times, really, it was my children, because otherwise I'm not sure I could have, I didn't want to carry on with that, but knowing that they were there. And the dog. And I know that Rosie says this as well.
I say it too.
I swear to God, just having another heartbeat in the house when the children's beds are empty was just, and actually that dog is in my bed, obviously. But generally speaking, I've realized that happiness is not a permanent state, obviously. It's a fleeting moments of happiness. And it's enjoying happiness when you know it's happening. So rather than going, oh, that was a nice day, or I really enjoyed that time when I last saw you 3 weeks ago, knowing that you're in that moment, you're happy. To me, having been through the dark period, and we have all had our different types of dark periods, but we can all remember how we felt in those moments, to really appreciate when we do feel happy, whether it's for 5 minutes, an hour, or a whole day, to really be present in that happiness is such a revelation. Never taking it for granted ever again.
Oh, I love that. I really think that's such wise words. Totally. And I think we do too often. And it's time to just stop and smell the roses as they're coming at us. So we actually really enjoy that moment. Absolutely. Being present. Thank you, Stacey. Well, thank you so much for everything you've said, for being so honest and brave and sharing your story again with us. I cannot wait to read your book, In Pursuit of Happiness, and I will be first in the queue ordering that when it's available. So let us know. I'm sure you'll put it on your Instagram. So
I will.
Thank you so much for being such a fabulous guest.
Thank you so much too.
That's it for today's episode. Make sure to head on over to Stacey Duguid on Instagram to follow Stacey and find out when her book, In Pursuit of Happiness, is coming out. And I look forward to you joining me on my next episode.
That's it for today's episode of Heartbreak to Happiness. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to win a free ticket to Sara's virtual Heartbreak to Happiness retreat. This is a transformative combination of live webinars with Sara herself, coupled with her empowering online video program designed to help you cope better with your breakup and start feeling happy again. Thank you, and join us again on the next episode for another dose of Heartbreak to Happiness.